Most men live as if they have 1,000 years to waste, drifting through their days with a mind divided against itself. They breathe without noticing the air, they work without seeing the task, and they love without being present. In the ancient tradition of the samurai, this fragmentation of the soul was considered a form of slow suicide. To the warrior, there was no such thing as a mundane moment, because any moment could be the one where the blade found its mark. If you do not live with the intensity of a man facing his final breath, you are not truly living. You are merely waiting for the end to arrive. This is the philosophy of the single strike, a way of existing where the past and the future are incinerated in the heat of the absolute present. The Japanese masters called this state ichigyo zamai, the practice of full, undivided concentration on a single act. It is the realization that when you are walking, you should only walk. When you are eating, you should only eat. And when you are facing an opponent, there is no room for the thought of victory or the fear of defeat. Miyamoto Musashi, the greatest swordsman to ever walk the earth, understood that the moment a warrior's mind flickered toward a secondary thought, he was already dead. Precision is not born from speed or strength, but from the elimination of everything that is not the target. In the modern world, we have lost this lethal clarity, trading our sovereign focus for 1,000 trivial distractions that leave us exhausted but unfulfilled. Chapter 1. The Curse of the Fragmented Mind. Consider the life of a man named Elias, a man who mirrors the quiet desperation of the modern age. Elias is successful by every external metric, yet he feels as though he is watching his life through a blurred lens. When he sits down to work, his mind is already at the evening meal. When he sits with his family, his thoughts are tethered to the stresses of the coming morning. He is a ghost in his own home, a passenger in his own body, never fully arriving anywhere because he is trying to be everywhere at once. This fragmentation is not a lack of time, but a lack of respect for the sanctity of the present. The weight of this half-lived existence began to crush Elias, manifesting as a persistent, hollow anxiety that no achievement could fill. He realized that by trying to manage everything, he was mastering nothing, and his spirit was becoming thin and transparent. Like a blade that has been blunted by hitting stone instead of steel, his resolve had lost its edge. He lived in a state of perpetual preparation, always getting ready for a life that seemed to start tomorrow. He had forgotten that the only life he would ever possess was the one occurring in the brief, flickering shadow between the inhalation and the exhalation. Chapter 2. The Way of the Single Strike. To find his way back to the center, Elias had to look toward the discipline of the ancient East, specifically the concept of the warrior's singular focus. In the Zen tradition, the master does not seek to do many things well. He seeks to do one thing with such totality that the distinction between the actor and the action vanishes. This is the essence of the single strike. It is the understanding that a lack of focus is not just a productivity failure, but a fundamental lack of respect for one's own mortality. To be distracted is to tell the universe that this moment of your life is not worth your full attention. Elias began to study the movements of the samurai, noticing how their every gesture was deliberate, finished, and absolute. There was no wasted energy, no fidgeting, and no hesitation. They treated the sharpening of a blade with the same reverence as the battle itself, for in the warrior's mind, there was no hierarchy of importance. Every act was an expression of their entire being. Elias realized that his own life was a series of unfinished strikes, half-hearted attempts that never quite connected because his soul was never fully behind the blow. He decided to adopt the rule of ichigyo zamai, vowing to treat every task as if it were the only task in existence. Chapter 3. The Death of the Ego. This transformation was not easy, as it required the systematic execution of the ego's desire for more. The ego thrives on the next, feeding on the illusion that the future holds a satisfaction that the present lacks. When Elias committed to washing a single dish with total presence, his mind screamed for a podcast, a notification, or a thought about his career. He had to learn to sit in the silence of the act, feeling the temperature of the water and the texture of the porcelain without judgment. He was learning to kill the greedy self that wanted to consume 3 experiences at once while experiencing none of them. In the philosophy of Bushido, the warrior accepts that he is already dead. By accepting death, he is freed from the distractions of hope and fear, allowing him to focus entirely on the duty at hand. Elias began to apply this death to his daily distractions. He treated his phone not as a tool for connection, but as a thief of his life force, relegating it to a drawer for hours at a time. He stopped identifying with his wandering thoughts and began to identify with his focused actions. He discovered that when you stop trying to escape the moment expands to provide everything you were searching for in the distance. Chapter 4. Forging the non-negotiable. True mastery is found in the systems we build to protect our focus from the chaos of the world. Elias established what the ancient masters would call a dojo of the mind, a set of non-negotiable boundaries that defined his day. He decided that the first 2 hours of his morning were a sacred space where no external noise was permitted to enter. This was his time for the single strike, a period where he would tackle his most difficult work with the intensity of a man in a duel. There was no checking of messages, no wandering toward the news, and no allowance for the trivial. He learned that discipline is not a burden, but a form of armor that protects the soul from being scattered by the winds of whim. By narrowing his field of vision, his impact began to deepen. His work, once shallow and derivative, began to take on a quality of craftsmanship that others noticed but could not replicate. He was no longer reacting to the world. He was acting upon it. The one life, one strike principle meant that if he was going to speak, he spoke the absolute truth. If he was going to work, he worked with absolute effort. The quality of his life was no longer measured by the quantity of his experiences, but by the depth of his presence within them. As Elias moved through the world with this newfound weight, he noticed a strange phenomenon. The people around him, usually frantic and rushed, seemed to quiet down in his presence. His stillness was contagious. Because he was no longer rushing toward the next moment, he had become an anchor for those who were drifting. He realized that the samurai's power did not come from the sword, but from the terrifying calm that preceded its use. To be fully present is to be powerful, for a man who cannot be distracted cannot be manipulated. He had moved from being a victim of his environment to being the master of his inner kingdom. The path of the single strike is not a destination, but a perpetual returning to the center. It is a daily battle against the gravity of the mundane and the seduction of the easy path. It requires us to look at our lives and ask, if this action were the final testament of my character, would I be satisfied? Most of us would have to answer in the negative, but the beauty of this philosophy is that every new breath is a chance to strike again. You do not need a new life. You simply need to bring the whole of your current life into the razor-thin edge of the now. Consider the blade of the samurai. It is folded 1,000 times, forged in fire, and tempered in water until it is capable of severing a falling silk scarf. Your mind must be forged in the same way. Every time you pull your attention back from a distraction and return it to your task, you are folding the steel of your resolve. Every time you choose silence over meaningless chatter, you are tempering your spirit. Over time, you become a person of substance, a person whose presence is felt before a single word is spoken. You become the embodiment of the single strike, a force of nature that is both calm and unstoppable. We live in an age that worships the many, but the wise man worships the one. Do not seek to be a person of many interests and shallow depths. Seek to be a person of one singular purpose, expressed through 1,000 different acts of total presence. Whether you are sharpening a pencil, writing a letter, or facing a crisis that threatens to undo you, do it with the entirety of your soul. Let there be no part of you left behind in the past, and no part of you reaching for the future. There is only the strike and the silence that follows. The weight of your life is determined by the gravity you bring to your moments. If you live lightly, you will be blown away by the first storm of adversity. But if you live with the heaviness of the samurai, grounded in the absolute reality of the present, you become immovable. The world will try to pull you into its fragmentation, but you must remain, as the Zen masters say, like a mountain that does not move for the clouds. One life, one strike. This is the only way to live without regret and to die without fear. When you finish this reflection, do not rush to the next thing. Do not let the momentum of the digital world carry you away into another cycle of mindless consumption. Instead, find the one task that sits before you, however small it may be, and perform it with the focus of a master. See the texture of the world again, hear the sounds you have been ignoring. Feel the weight of your own existence. The way of the warrior is not found in distant mountains or ancient scrolls. It is found in the palm of your hand, in this very moment, waiting for you to finally arrive.